Great, perfect. Hello, sir. I heard you went to see Hamilton. How was that?
Do you believe in evolution, sir?
I believe in evolution. I embrace the view that God created the heavens and the earth and the seas and all that's in them.
Right,
and,
but do you believe in evolution as a way he did it?
The means, Chris, that he used to do that, I can't say, but I do believe in that fundamental truth.
Did you take biology in school? Did you take science, which is all based on evolutionary belief?
I believe with all my heart that God created the heavens and the earth, the seas, and all that is in them. How he did that, I'll ask him about someday.
Op-ed, Pence actually argued that the Disney movie Mulan was liberal propaganda designed to support allowing women to serve in the military. As Pence wrote in 1999, despite her delicate features and voice, Disney expects us to believe that Mulan's ingenuity and courage were enough to carry her to military success on an equal basis with her cloddish cohorts. Obviously, this is Walt Disney's attempt to add childhood expectation to the cultural debate over the role of women in the military.
I love you, Mike. You're the reason I'm never going to get impeached. Sir.
I have never met anyone who has more compassion for women.
In March, Pence actually signed a bill that, among other restrictions, bans abortion sought because of fetal anomaly, like Down syndrome, that requires abortion providers to bury or cremate fetal tissue. Indiana is the only other state besides North Dakota to ban abortion motivated by fetal anomaly, a provision that a federal judge has already deemed unconstitutional.
But the Indiana case says, look, if you are a woman who even has a miscarriage and has done research to see perhaps if you could have had an abortion, women who suffer miscarriages and stillbirths, and women who have precipitous home births all now can go to jail, essentially as murderers. So here's a woman who goes to the hospital for help because she has a miscarriage and ends up being sentenced to jail for 20 years.
33-year-old Purvi Patel became the first woman in Indiana to be convicted under their feticide law and sentenced to over 20 years in prison in a case that defies logic.
On Monday, Purvi Patel, an Indian-American woman, became the first person in U.S. history sentenced to prison for feticide for ending her own pregnancy. In 2013, Patel arrived at a hospital bleeding. She told doctors she had a miscarriage and disposed of her stillborn fetus in a trash receptacle. Under questioning by police, Patel said she had believed she was about 2 months pregnant. After miscarrying in the bathroom, she said she tried unsuccessfully to resuscitate the fetus, which wasn't moving. She told police, quote, "I assumed because the baby was dead, there was nothing to do." Bleeding, in shock, and not wanting her conservative Hindu parents to find out, she disposed of the fetus and went to the hospital.
Prosecutors say Patel ordered abortion drugs online and documented taking them in a text message to a friend, saying, by the way, these pills taste like... If these pills don't work, I'm gonna be mad. She delivered the baby, estimated to be more than 20 weeks gestation, on the floor of her Granger home, then put it in a dumpster behind a restaurant her family owned. St. Joseph County Prosecutor Ken Cotter says many people do not understand the facts of this case. The prosecution of Ms. Patel was focused on the fact that the child was born alive and that Ms. Patel did nothing to help that child survive, he said in a statement.
Prosecutors would later accuse Patel of taking drugs to try to end her pregnancy based on text messages to a friend where she discussed buying the drugs online. But no evidence of abortion drugs was found in her body. The prosecutors also used a discredited float test to claim Purvi Patel's fetus, which they said was between 25 and 28 weeks, was born alive. So in addition to feticide, Patel was charged and convicted of neglect of a dependent. On Monday, a judge sentenced Purvi Patel to serve 20 years in prison. In total, her sentences actually add up to 41 years, but will be served concurrently with 10 years suspended.
They charge her with feticide, and originally people were very confused. It's like, how can you be charged with both feticide and neglect of a dependent? Because feticide is understood as causing the death of the fetus. But the prosecutor says in Indiana, no, our law means that any deliberate attempt by a woman to terminate her own pregnancy is a crime. It didn't succeed, so we convinced that they then deliberately used a invalid scientific test to convince the jury that the baby had been born alive and neglected.
The prosecution argued that Ms. Patel had illegally ordered miscarriage-inducing drugs online, which caused the death of her fetus. All despite the fact that the prosecutors have no proof that Patel actually received and took the pills she ordered online. A toxicologist told jurors that he couldn't find any evidence of abortion drugs in Purvi Patel's system, and that yet she was still found guilty of feticide because of it.
That's all we really need to say about it.
A lot of people in the public have asked, why not murder?
The charging decision was made more than a year ago. There were a lot of factors in that, and we're going to deal with the charges that we have.
The conviction of neglect, which represents the bulk of her sentence, completely contradicts the feticide conviction. See, a charge of feticide requires a dead fetus, while a charge of neglect of a dependent requires a live birth. But the prosecution used the lung float test to prove that there had been a live birth, despite the fact that, according to experts like Gregory J. Davis, professor of pathology at the University of Kentucky, the lung float test was disproven over 100 years ago as an indicator for live birth. As in and of itself, it is unreliable, and more importantly, even if we agree hypothetically that the baby took a breath, that doesn't mean Ms. Patel did anything wrong. What if she was scared and bleeding herself and she didn't clamp the cord in time because she didn't know how, and that's how the baby
Float
died?
test, as I understand it, and Dr. Gregory Davis at the University of Kentucky is the real expert, is that it's a test that suggests that you take the lungs out of the fetus or the newborn, and if they float, that means there was air in them and the baby took a breath. However, it has been known for 100 years that air can get into the lungs in other ways, so it is an invalid test used, for example, in countries like El Salvador to convict women of illegal abortion who have actually suffered miscarriages and stillbirths.
Earlier this year, even the UN urged El Salvador to pardon all women jailed there under these feticide laws. So are these laws really about protecting unborn children, or is this about demonizing women and limiting their reproductive
So
rights?
in 1978 is when the feticide statute was written in Indiana, and it was written to punish people who harm pregnant women, resulting in the death of her fetus. It's never been used against a pregnant woman herself. And the defense, many states who have feticide laws on the books have exemptions for pregnant women, not so in Indiana, though her defense argued during the appeal that even if that exemption doesn't exist on the books, the debate about the statute's intention can still be had.
The Indiana Court of Appeals overturned the feticide conviction of a woman, saying that the state's law wasn't intended to be used to prosecute women for their own abortions.
That's why this administration will work with the Congress to end taxpayer funding of abortion and abortion providers.
Surrounded by men, Donald Trump signs an anti-abortion executive order reinstating a policy that would undermine family planning around the world.
That's why on Monday, President Trump reinstated the Mexico City policy to prevent foreign aid from funding organizations that promote or perform abortions worldwide.
The president, it's no secret, has made it very clear that he's a pro-life president. He wants to stand up for all Americans, including the unborn. And I think the reinstatement of this policy is not just something that echoes that value, but respects taxpayer funding.
This action will do more than change policy. It will make it more difficult for millions of girls and women to access the contraception and healthcare they need to determine their futures. Now is the time to build on progress, not reverse it.
He speaks from his heart. And
well, I had to speak from my heart and my brain, just so we understand. Most people speak from their heart. Right. This is maybe more important.
And that's why next week, President Donald Trump will announce a Supreme Court nominee who will uphold the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution in the tradition of the late and great Justice Antonin Scalia.
If he thinks I'm doing something wrong, Mike, I would want him to come in and say, really, you got it, and that's okay. Say, really, you got it, and that's okay.